I had received this from my evaluation of the document. It contained information of the closing register, which was published. There was no additional sensitive information that was brought on board through evaluating, assessing this document that I had received.
But you knew that the obvious inference to draw from the fact that Sergeant Nkosi sent you this document is that he had someone inside the BEC who was giving him documents.
I didn't know. I don't know where that comes from. So I did not know where he received this.
The obvious inference to be drawn from this was that Sergeant Nkosi had someone inside the BEC who was giving him documents. Is that, do you take issue with that?
I do take. That's not true.
Well, what other inference could you draw?
The truth of where he received this. And the truth of...
From what other source could Sergeant Nkosi possibly have received this document? Bear in mind that you have said, ordinarily, this is a document used by the BEC. So other than the BEC, what would his source have been, ordinarily, other than the BEC?
Yes, Commissioner. That information is known. He received this from the General. He did not receive it from anyone in the BEC.
And where would the General have received it?
The General was he not a member of the BEC?
No, he was not a member of the BEC.
Well, where would the General have received it?
I don't know where he would have received, but he would have received it internally. He would have received it somewhere internally.
Presumably from someone inside the BEC.
Presumably, yes.
Yes.
But
So Sergeant Nkosi had an indirect route into the BEC through the General. You didn't know it at the time, but directly or indirectly, Sergeant Nkosi must have had a route to the BEC to get into the BEC to get this document.
Well, I'm not sure, and I can't comment on that. I've got no comment on that.
Mr. Mnisi, was this a publicly available document?
The document in its form, no.
Yes. So he didn't get it properly. It wasn't shared with him in a permissible way, in a regular way. Surely you must accept that.
I've accepted that, Commissioner, and I've agreed to that.
Yes, that's a simple proposition that's been made to you, that
Yes.
Sergeant Nkosi had possession to a tender-related document that he should not have had. That's a simple proposition that's being made. You must accept that.
Commissioner, I've accepted that.
Okay,
But if you had
thank you.
listened to the discussions, the inference was that Sergeant Nkosi received it from BEC directly. So,
Well, I'm reformulating. Sergeant
Okay.
Nkosi had access to a tender-related document that should not have been in his possession. You accept that?
I have accepted that.
And that suggests, or at least on the face of it, is a corruption already of the tender process. It is being muddied. Do you accept that? That
No.
a tender document that is internal of an incomplete tender assessment process is sitting with a member of the public, because that's what he is. It's sitting with a member of a public. That is problematic for that tender process. No?
Commissioner, I don't accept that, with all due respect.
Okay,
The content
explain.
of this report that's here does not contain any sensitive information
No, it
whatsoever.
doesn't matter. No, from my question, it doesn't matter whether it contains sensitive information or not. It's a tender document or tender-related document. As a matter of policy, it should not be outside
I've agreed to that,
of
yes.
the municipality. That it is outside of the municipality with a member of the public in itself is an irregularity. You must be able to accept
I've
that.
agreed to that.
Thank you. That's all I'm checking with you. Thank you.
But you didn't take any steps upon being made aware of this irregularity, did you?
Indeed, again, I assessed the content of the document. The document, from my perspective, did not need me to take any further steps. There was nothing for me to raise.
But there was something for you to raise. It was that a document internal to the city relating to this tender process had made its way to Sergeant Nkosi.
From my perspective, all I'll need to do is safeguard the procurement process, as I previously stated. In this instance, I assessed the document that was received. It did not contain any sensitive information in terms of the evaluation process in its entirety. Hence, I felt there's no need for me to escalate this any further. I don't have any conclusive evidence on any leak at this stage in time. But I do agree, this is a leaked draft administrative report. It doesn't contain anything sensitive or confidential. I had nothing to report.
Did the probity report pick up that this document had made its way to Sergeant Nkosi?
I'm not certain if those are one of the reasons that were provided.
If we go to the document, I think you'll accept that it didn't.
It did not specifically say Sergeant Nkosi received this, no.
It didn't specifically speak of leaking of any documents to members of the public, did it?
Nope.
So the probity report was unable to pick up the leak of members of the of this document to members of the public.
No, it was unable to. It didn't focus on that.
So the probity report didn't have mechanisms that enabled it to identify potential leaks of information.
This was a closing register, firstly. There's no sensitive information that's contained in this. And as far as I'm concerned, there are sufficient processes that are designed by the probity teams to test any potential leaks within the system.
But they didn't pick up this one.
As far as I'm concerned, the process and systems are there.
At this point, Mr. Chackalson, I think we should take the adjournment.
And that becomes a reason, another reason to cancel this tender.
Well, Commissioner, I think these were discussions that were held at BAC. I did not take these decisions on my own. Presentations were made. It was assessed. It was accepted that this could be a contradiction that would affect the evaluation of this bid.
A committee necessarily by definition means you are not the only one there. You are with other people. You happen to be the chairperson of this committee. You are the witness in the box right now, and you must justify as part of that committee. You must explain in a way that we understand. The issue is your committee that you chaired provided a reason, another reason for cancelling this tender. That was a valid reason to offer as one of the reasons to cancel the tender, because the bid document has informed bidders what is required of them, and that's a basis on which we evaluate a bid as a BAC. So I guess what I'm saying, what I'm putting to you is, I don't accept the reason that you are offering why that bid was cancelled, at least this one reason. I don't know if you have any comment that.
Yes, please, Commissioner. At this point in time, I was convinced that this is a valid reason, that the contradiction would lead to potential litigation and open the city up to litigations. I was further convinced that it would be an additional matter to accept and to highlight as part and parcel of the myriad of other irregularities that were identified at this point in time.
Thanks.
But let me take it further. This is for ad hoc security services, is it not? You're going to appoint a panel, and then you can call on them to perform security services as and when needed at various properties of the city.
As far as I'm concerned, this is for watchman services.
It's an ad hoc security service.
My answer is, as far as I'm concerned, this is watchman services. TMPD chooses whether they would like to use this for ad hoc security services or advertise another tender for ad hoc security services. But the content of this tender was for watchman services and replacing the existing tender that was there. Not specifically for ad hoc. It was to guard all 30 sites. All 30 sites.
So what happens then to the ad hoc needs that are no longer going to be capable of being addressed in the 2016-2017 tender, under the 2016-17 tender, because that tender will have run its course?
Ideally speaking, if those ad hoc areas, okay, firstly, SC, risk assessments are done by TMPD and the relevant user department, which identifies the need to add an additional site for security-related services. So at this point in time, risk assessments have been concluded. All sites that are deemed important have been included on this. If there were ad hoc sites from the previous tender, I would presume that within this tender, that assessment, if it's still valid, they'll be included on this now, so that you stop a process of saying, we'll now add this later on. They should have been included on this. This will be to guard all city sites. And if in the near future, if this tender was successful, another site which wasn't included as part of this bid is identified, TMPDA and the relevant user department have discretion to conduct their own risk assessment and decide whether it is a valid point to have another ad hoc service on that point. But for this tender, all key and essential sites would have been taken into account.
Even so, why is it an irregularity to say some of our sites are going to need armed guards, some are not? We want a security company to be able to service all of our sites depending on where we place them.
I see, my answer is that at the time when the report was being considered, this was a valid contradiction from mine and the BAC's perspective. And this was a valid flaw that needed to be highlighted as part and parcel of the myriad of other matters that had already been raised.
Well, I want to put it to you that this is not a material irregularity at all. Certainly not one that in its own right would justify cancellation of a tender. What's your response to that?
I respectfully disagree with you, SC, on the basis that when we looked at this, it was a valid contradiction. The presentations, I might not recall verbatim what the outcomes of the discussions were and what the main reason was that led us to isolating this as an additional issue. But it was of high concern, and that contradiction was raised at that point in time as a key issue that must be highlighted, which might not have received the necessary highlights from the probity team. And this, just to add, it was an additional matter. There were more than 12 other findings that had already been raised by the probity team. Amongst those, there were essential matters that couldn't be cured. So this is now raising every single issue that's there. This is another issue. We have to raise this thing accordingly. This is why I'm saying that. Some instances were also taken to court for cancelling tenders. So we need to ensure that we have covered all angles and all loopholes that have been identified. So you throw in every single additional issue that you think is a reason that's valid to justify this cancellation.
You keep on speaking about additional reasons, but if one looks at the resolution, which is the decision of the committee, these are the only reasons given.
I did respond to that matter, that the probity report has already, BAC has already discussed all findings that were there. As standard, we don't regurgitate and repeat all those findings again onto this report. The BAC report is just a summary of the discussions that were raised. The attachments, which include the detailed BEC report as well as the actual probity report, are part and parcel of the entire pack. So this doesn't mean they're disregarded. So I'm explaining it in that way, that these are additional matters. It might not be clear in terms of the writing that's there, but the context and sequence of events were raising additional matters that were not raised in the probity report.
You talked about being taken to court on other cases in relation to cancellations. You must then know that when you get taken to court for an administrative act of cancelling a tender, your decision stands or falls by the reasons that are given for it.